What a bummer. What do you do when it's too cloudy outside to sun dry your figs? Well, we're going to go ahead and dry them in an oven. We're going to set the oven at its lowest possible setting, which is about maybe 150 degrees. Now, a word of caution. So if it is cloudy, which it is right now, I just happen to hit a bad weather, meaning it's actually cloudy, which is nice in a way, but not good for sun drying figs, because if you cut your figs and they do not start the drying process, they will sour fairly quickly. So you really have to dehydrate the moisture and get it out. So here we're going to do an example from the beginning, if you will. I've just freshly picked these figs. These are brown, Texas brown turkey figs. We're going to wash them, clean them up, strain them a little bit. Again, this is a follow-up video on sun drying figs. I just happen to hit a time of the year where we don't have any sun, and I have a lot of competition from squirrels, and if I don't pick these things, the squirrels tell all of their friends and they decimate the crop. So there is a little bit of pressure to harvest them, otherwise I'll have absolutely nothing to harvest. And so first thing to do, clean the figs, let them dry a little bit, and cut the stems off of it. So that's what I'm doing here. We're cutting the stems off. We're going to, if they're a larger fig, we're going to cut it in half and cut it into quarters. And if it's a mid-sized fig, we can cut it into thirds, which will save a little bit of space and time. And if it's a small fig, you can just cut it in half. The idea is to try to get all of the figs about all of the same size so that they'll all dry at about the same rate. Not so good if you've got some bigger ones and smaller ones. So here's kind of an example of cutting it into thirds. So I'm cutting one third off of it, and now I'm cutting the other section into halves. And now the next step is real important. On your screen, make sure that you put the skin side down, which contacts the metal, the grate. Do not put the jelly side up against the drying rack, otherwise it will stick, and it will stick extremely well. So be very careful. It is a little bit more painstaking, but you've got to initially get them all sitting upright like this, and don't have the jelly side sitting down. It will stick onto it, and it's a real bugger to try to pull them off. So there I filled up an entire tray, and we've made these trays, and we're going to go through the next step and showing you. I'm kind of these trays, the ones we made, fit on the existing trays, shelves, if you will, in the oven. Your size will be different than mine. It is important to use, I'm using a hardware cloth only because I happen to have this stuff. It's about a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch hardware cloth. I think a little bit smaller, if you've got to go and buy some, maybe a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch hardware cloth is probably a little bit nicer, so that the figs, when they do dry, they lose a lot of volume, and they can fall through the grates. So here's an example. So what we're going to do to give some strength to this hardware cloth, we're going to cut it to size, and you will have to measure your shelves in your oven and make sure it fits well within the shelves. Don't make it too big so that it doesn't, so it's easy to put in and out. You don't want it to be too large. So I'm taking some metal shears, and I'm taking this hardware cloth, which cuts fairly easy. Now we are going to bend the edges so that we don't we do two things. Once you cut it, you're going to find that the edges are somewhat sharp because you have all of these little barbs sticking out. By folding the edges, we're going to take a 1.5 inch dimension and add it to each length and width, and we're going to fold it 2 times over so that we can strengthen the structure, and also to get away from those little, because it'll be kind of sharp when you cut it. So this is a nice way to sort of stiffen it, give it some support, and also to make it safer to handling. So after I've bent the first dimension 1.5 inches, now I've taken a piece of 3/4 inch stalk and I bend it again, and then I'm going to bend it one more time with my hand so that the very top surface of it is nice smooth wire, and so it doesn't have any little sharp edges on it. And I'm going to do that on all four sides. Here it is. I'm bending it over on top of the 3/4 inch, and then after I've done that, then I will go back and I'll bend it again so that I make a nice return and the top of it doesn't have any little barbs sticking out. Now, you don't have to have this plier. I just happen to have it. It's kind of for canvas stretching, and so I'm using it to sharpen up the edges, and it takes the folding that I just did and it smushes it all together and makes it look a little bit more neater, more professional, tighter, gets rid of any waves, makes it a little bit stronger. So now I'm bending over the short ends, and I'm taking again any piece of 3/4 inch material that you can fold it. Again, I'm using these are canvas stretching pliers. You don't need them. You could use any normal plier just to sort of close up that bend, and you can kind of see it. There it is. I'm kind of shaping up the corners, checking the dimensions, and doing the final piece. Again, you can use hardware cloth. Comes in a roll. They're fairly easy to cut. If you don't have a pair of metal shears, you can use some scissors, depending on the thickness of the hardware cloth. But with this method, you've made yourself a nice custom shelf. The air can easily flow through this. You don't want to put these figs on a flat pan, a solid pan, because what happens, they end up cooking on the pan, and you don't want to cook the figs, you want to dry them. So here's this example of the final product. I mean, it's not made in China, factory fabricated, but it does do the job. So thank you very much for watching, and watch my first video on sun drying figs. Thank you very much. Remember to subscribe.